Hi, it's Laura from Firebird Summit. From my last week in Medellin, Colombia. Starting next week, I will be coming to you from the US again. Today, I want to talk about something that is a topic near and dear to my heart, and there's been some recent research that kind of fuels it a little bit that I wanted to talk to, and that is managers. So I've been talking about Gallup a lot recently because I've been getting more involved and certified in their strengths-based work. However, there's another big body of work that Gallup has really invested heavily in over recent years that I also really spend a lot of time with, and that's their work on managers. So as a rule, culture and employee engagement are big topics for me. And what Gallup has found throughout their research is that a manager is basically responsible for about 70% of any employee's actual engagement level at work. And direct employee engagement contributes very explicitly to team productivity, which translates directly into revenue. So this is actually something that everybody should care about. Not everyone does, but it's got real implications to your business, so it does make sense to pay attention to it. One of the things that shakes out of this, though, is the question of how do managers manage? Or more importantly, how do managers get trained to manage? And the truth is, they often don't. Only some of the largest companies do a lot of direct investment in managers, and even then, it's kind of hit and miss. More often than not, managers' training is limited very much to basic systems and tools, expectations for their specific and explicit role, and then whatever they go out and find on their own. This is kind of a challenge because it's hard to know exactly what you're looking for or what your organization is going to be open to if you don't have any kind of framework coming from your company. Now, having said that, I also say all the time to my clients and to the people that I work with that leaving this to your company to train you on is a little bit like leaving it to your kids to teach you how to be a parent. Yes, you will always learn a lot from your kids once you have them, but if you only wait for them to teach you stuff, then you're probably going to have trouble getting out in front of them and making sure that you're prepared for things that are coming. So more often than not, what I like to talk to managers about is a couple of stacking elements that come up in this process. The first one is something that I recently heard Simon Sinek say on an interview he was doing for his book, The Infinite Game, which is that, the best leaders are students of leadership. And I think a challenge that a lot of managers have is really starting to think of themselves as being leaders. Just like being a coach or being any other kind of form of what a manager can take with your staff, it's really important to start looking at it across multiple dimensions. You have people that you are responsible for helping shepherd through this particular journey of their career, however long that lasts. And so it's a useful way to start identifying things that are meaningful for you to start learning. Now, when it comes to it, though, obviously not everybody is in a managerial role because that's what they want to do. So I think one of the first things that I work with clients about is, are you in the role because you just happen to land in it, or are you in the role because you really want it? Again, kind of like parenting, those who find themselves in it by accident and not because they really want to be in it usually have a lot of struggle to get comfortable with what they need to do in order to succeed in the role. Another thing that comes up a lot is how this manifests itself within teams. Ultimately, this becomes a really big diversity issue, and this really leads to the research I mentioned. So, there are two bodies of research that tie in here very directly, and it has to do with women in leadership roles in organizations. The first one is, and there's a ton of studies that demonstrate this, is that women, more than men, will often wait until they feel they can check off every single item on a job description before they apply for a job. And men are more comfortable applying for jobs as long as they kind of, meet like 70%, 60, maybe even 50% of the requirements. Men tend to be much more willing to sort of step out on a limb and say, I know this part, but I can figure those other things out. Women, as a rule, will wait until they're really, really confident that they can hit every single criteria. And then the flip side of that is a study that came out last month by McKinsey, which talks about how the glass ceiling is not actually where the biggest problem is when it comes to equity across gender lines in business. It's actually that first rung of the managerial ladder. It's that place where women lose the most ground the most quickly, and it has drastic long-term effects farther down the corporate chain. And this is something that I really want to talk to because it's a very direct solution. First of all, waiting until you can check off every single list on the items that are looked for managerial roles is definitely not necessary. And to be fair, your male counterparts don't wait until there's that point either. So I would certainly never recommend that. But even more than that is if you do feel that this is something you want, how are you preparing? What is the research you're doing? What is the reading that you're doing? What is it that you are consuming so that you can start demonstrating and exercising some managerial skills in your role before you actually have the title? Because more often than not, that degree of confidence comes from walking the walk, even if you're not yet ready to talk the talk. So finding ways to incorporate that into your existing work. Maybe you're just managing projects. Maybe you're not quite to a point where you have direct responsibility for someone else, but you can start taking on smaller capabilities with smaller groups and smaller settings while you're building up your confidence. These are all really tactical ways to get to the point where you can say, great, I'm ready for this managerial position. Because getting over that step is an essential component to being able to progress your career further. The final tidbit I'll point out is that a lot of times your upward trajectory in your career is ultimately up to you and how far you choose to push things. But there's some really interesting studies that show that pretty much what your income is by the time you're about 40 is about where it's going to be for the rest of your career. So keep in mind that getting off the track or not pushing aggressively in the beginning can have repercussions later. Now, certainly there are always ways that you can come back and try to close the gap, but what I would always recommend and what I always discuss, particularly with my younger women who are getting involved in corporate environments, is don't close any doors too soon. Make sure that you're keeping things open and you're pushing as hard as you can as long as you're interested in it, and don't sacrifice your long-term objectives for short-term priorities unless you're really, really sure you're ready to pay the price for it. So that's it for this week. My question really is, what is it that you are doing to prepare yourself for your next opportunity, whether it's as a manager, whether it's higher up the food chain, or whether it's owning your own business? When it comes down to it, more often than not, we need to feel like we have enough information before we move into our next phase. So what are you doing to get there? Anyway, have a fantastic week. I will talk to you next week from Miami. Thanks.